Born in 1909 and leaving us in 1977, Tanaka Kinuyo remains one of Japan's most famous film actresses. She performed in over 250 films throughout her long career and acted in television as well. She was also Japan's second woman director of commercial films. Recently, Tanaka's directed films have enjoyed great interest in international film circles, with several special retrospective events and film tours in her honor. In this interview, renowned feminist film scholar Ayako Saitō discusses various aspects of Tanaka's life and career, offering insightful interpretations of her films and directorial choices. Dr. Saitō is a professor in the Department of Art Studies at Meiji Gakuin University in Tokyo, Japan, specializing in film studies. Her publications include Hitchcock's trilogy, A Logic of Mise-en-Scène, 1999, Reading as Woman, the collaboration of Ayako Wakao and Masumura Yasuzo, 2010, and Occupation and Memory, the representation of woman's body in post-war Japanese cinema, 2014. She has co-authored many books, including Wakao Ayako Film Actress, 2003, and Male Bonding, East Asian Cinema and Homosociality, 2004. Professor Saitō is the president of the Japan Society of Image Arts and Sciences, Nihon Eizo Gakkai, and she is also one of the members of the Women Pioneers in Japanese Cinema Project, Nihon Eiga ni Okeru Josei Pioneer, a Japanese language initiative online at the link you see on screen. So Professor Saitō, thank you so much for being with me today. We're going to be talking about the director and famous film actress Tanaka Kinuyo. So I'd like to begin, if you would please tell us some background about Tanaka Kinuyo, particularly before she started directing films. Basically, who was she and what was her career or experience in Japanese media industries?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this exciting interview. I hope I can be of any help. Let me start with Tanaka's biographical information. Tanaka Kinuyo is undoubtedly one of the most important film actors in Japanese film history. Not only did she appear in more than 250 films in her 52-year acting career, but she was also the first post-war Japanese woman film director. Although she may be best known overseas for her roles and collaboration with Mizoguchi Kenji, she was appreciated by such prestigious directors as Ozu Yasujiro, Shimizu Hiroshi, Gosho Heinosuke, Naruse Mikio, and Kinoshita Keisuke, to name but a few. She was known for having achieved her extraordinary accomplishments through dogged hard work and total dedication to her craft. The recent spotlight on her directorial work, though way long overdue, is more than welcome, and I hope this interest and re-evaluation of Tanaka as both actress and director will continue. Tanaka was born in 1909 in a respectable family in the city of Shimonoseki in Yamaguchi Prefecture and was raised in Osaka for much of her formative years. However, she was barely able to attend elementary school because of her father's untimely death. From an early age, she was set to show her talent in performance, and in 1920, she joined the Biwa Girls operetta troupe. Biwa is a traditional Japanese musical instrument. Her connection to the film industry began with one of her elder brothers, who then worked for Shochiku Shimogamo Studio in Kyoto. Founded in 1895 as a kabuki production company, Shochiku had just begun producing films. With her brother's help, she was introduced to Nomura Hote, then a major director, as well as the studio head of the Shochiku. She was hired by the studio, which would become one of the major studios in Japan, known for its modern Hollywood-influenced cinematic styles. Her first credited film appearance was in October 24, and in 2 months after, she played leading role, a film directed by Shimizu Hiroshi. Thanks to her hard work and natural talent, her stardom quickly rose. Her role as a young girl next door in some college films by Ozu gained her popularity among young audiences, notably A Graduated But in 1929. In 1931, she appeared in Japan's first talkie, The Neighbor's Wife and Mine, directed by Gosho Hensuke. Gosho also directed the first film adaptation, though in the silent format, of the famous Kawabata Yasunari short story, The Dancing Girl of Izu, in 1933, in which her natural presence and innocence youth, though she was already 22 years old then, in the beautiful landscape of hot spring and mountains enthralled many film fans. In 1938, she starred in Nomura Hiromasa's Arizen Katsura, Flower in Storm, with Uehara Ken. The film is a legendary production and was regarded as the representative of Shochiku's women's cinema, that is melodrama, yielding the highest grossing film of the pre-war period. She played the roles of the modern girl and traditional feminine type, which embodied two poles of femininity coexisting in rapidly changing modernity in Japan in the 1930s. In 1940, at the age of 31, she starred in Naniwa no Onna, English title, A Woman in Osaka, regrettably now a lost film, directed by Mizoguchi Kenji. And as we know, their collaboration would bloom in the post-war years. Meeting Mizoguchi at this stage of her career was especially significant for her because she was already 30 years old, 31 years old, no longer a young woman, facing the issue of age as an actress, needed to modify her star image to a more mature one. During the Pacific War period, she also appeared in propaganda films such as Pray at Dawn, 1940, and Army, 1944. The latter film was her first collaboration with Kinoshita, and the last sequence in which Tanaka gives one of her strongest performances as a mother who supports the war by raising her son as a respectable soldier, yet cannot help but desperately try to catch the last glimpse of her son marching off to war, became so famous because some thought that definitely the propaganda overstayed actually, despite its ostensible militarist ideology, showing the mother's desperate run in the tracking shot may have subverted its propaganda message, creating in the audience the feeling of anti-war. The post-war period was a challenging time for the actress. She had to adopt her career, as did so many filmmakers at the time, to the new democratic social and cultural order promoted by the Allied occupation forces. She expressed in an interview that the war deprived of her 30s of a possible career that could have brought her more maturity and challenges as an actress. But she was close to her 40s when the war ended. Also, it was not easy for the entire film industry to adjust the 180-degree turn of social and ideological reforms. To go in line with this policy, Mizoguchi directed 3 films, all featuring Tanaka, which would be later coined as Women's Liberation Trilogy. Victory of Women, 1946, The Love of Sumako, the actress, 1948, and My Love Has Been Burning, 1949. She played the roles of a woman lawyer, a pioneering theater actress, and a pioneering woman political activist. The last 2 films were both biopics based on real characters set during the Taisho democracy period. In October of 1949, she joined a 3-month touring trip to the United States as one of Japan's first post-war cultural convoys. She went to Hawaii first, then to Hollywood. There, she visited the major studios and met stars. She came back to Japan in early 1950, but her demeanors upon return were received by bitter and harsh reactions from the audience. That year, she also terminated her exclusive contract with Shochiku and became freelance, which enabled her to select her own job without limiting herself to Shochiku. I will talk about her venturing into a directorial career in a moment, but let me point out here that her visit to Hollywood, along with her involvement in the Women's Liberation Trilogy, might have promoted her to challenge her work behind the camera. It is especially important note that her elevating performance skills and engagement in her craft of acting coincide with her endeavor as a film director, especially in her ripe collaboration with Mizoguchi in the 1950s in such masterpieces as The Life of Haru, 1952, Ugetsu, and Sanshou the Bailiff, 1954. Having known both sides of the camera, I would argue, deepened her cinematic achievement, both as an actress and a director. These two roles should not be considered separated, but as both sides of a coin. Once she returned to direction, she was already in her mid-40s and began playing old women, sometimes over her age, not reluctant to smear her physical beauty and her star image. To sum up, even though she played several different characters and roles, the predominant her star image in her pre-war prime was a good-hearted, innocent woman who experiences many hardships and shows great perseverance, passion, and strong will, yet in the end willing to accept her fate. In later years, she played various challenging, sometimes not very attractive roles, which ranged from prostitute to old mothers and housemates. In real life, she was independent and strong-willed, quite different from the heroines she played early in her career. She began living with Shimizu Hiroshi in late teens and was rumored to have many romantic interests, including Mizoguchi and Shochiku Kamada's studio head Kido Shiro, but only rumors and truth unknown. Ultimately, Tanaka never married and was quoted as saying she was married to cinema as a proof of her dedication to her craft. For all her petite figure and innocent face, she was a forerunner of the career woman with ambitions and will of her own. She left 6 directorial works under the studio system, appeared in more than 250 films, and was awarded 5 times in domestic major film awards, as well as international film festivals such as Berlin Film Festival. An amazing accomplishment.
Thank you so much for painting this eloquent picture of such a rich career and such a complicated person who lived through so much and accomplished so much so tremendously. So how did Tanaka go from this amazing career as an actress to become a film director? What enabled this transition? Why did she want to become a director? And after this successful career as an actor?
Actually, details of how Tanaka came into directing are not all clear, but in my opinion, there are a few major reasons. First, she was facing a turning point as an actress, as I said, confronting the issue of age. She expressed her resentment of wartime deprivation of her prime time in her 30s as an actress, as I said. In the entertainment industry, ageism against actresses is still very strong now. Imagine how it must have been 70 years ago. She was no longer expected to be the lead, to say the least. Second, the transition from wartime to post-war was not very easy either, as many directors such as Mizoguchi or Tsunaruse had difficulty finding their way around. As for Tanaka, her trip to Hollywood was an eye-opener for her to consider seriously realizing her secret desire to challenge to be a director. Tanaka said in an interview that, quote, after the war, also in Japan, women's advancement became evident in every aspect of society, including the entrance of women in parliament. I too felt like trying to do something new by working as a female director, end quote. To add, she also was a very avid film fan and cinephile for a long time. So film director might have been a kind of, natural outcome, a challenge for her. She also talked about that she learned when she was in Hollywood about the fact that some actresses were venturing into the craft of dedication, which inspired her to consider her own career. She was also conscious of the career of Leni Riefenstahl as well. With her popularity waning, as well as an aspiration for a new career in her craft, she must have become serious about pursuing to be a director. As I have indicated, when she returned from the US, she was heavily criticized. Drastic changes in her Americanized demeanors, such as dressed in Western clothes, wearing dark sunglasses, Hollywood acquiring thick makeup, blowing kisses, etc., shocked the audience and journalists alike, waiting to welcome her at the Haneda airport and then in Ginza when she paraded celebrating her return from the US. Remember, Japan was still under the US occupation, and the bitter feelings about the defeat in the war was still very relevant in Japanese society. But this kind of cold, scandalous reaction to her US experience might have enforced her motivation to embark on this challenge, since her strong-willed, resilient personality might have ignited her in a fighting spirit. It is also quite likely that after return from Hollywood, she might have considered close connections, including producers and directors, about her venture to be a director. But apparently it was not easy. She said in an interview that it took her 3 years to be able to direct her debut film, Love Letters, in 1953. The film was produced by Nagashima Ichiro, who was an uncle of actress Kagawa Kyoko. And the film was scripted by Kinoshita Keisuke. Nagashima was an important supporter of Tanaka's directorial venture, actually. Having found her producer who was willing to help her realize her dream was necessary to materialize her dream. He produced Naruse's Mother, 1952, in which Tanaka played the leading character, a widow who raises her children despite many hardships, and the film was critically acclaimed. Tanaka was then able to be Naruse's assistant for 2 months during the shooting of his older brother, younger sister, 1953. Nagashima actually produced Tanaka's fifth film, Girls of Dark, with Kagawa playing an important side role. And he really played an important role in embarking her to be a director. The next film, The Moon Has Risen, 1955, was originally Ozu project. Ozu wrote the script in 1947 and was going to direct it with the cast of Tanaka as the lead and other familiar faces and newcomers, but Shochiku objected to this project. He couldn't make it. So Ozu managed to get Nikkatsu involved in producing the film to help financially the Directors Guild of Japan as its president, and have Tanaka as the director around in 1954, I think. The film had a strong resonance with Ozu's style. Therefore, like her previous film, the film was regarded as an Ozu work, dismissing Tanaka as its directorial force. And it is true, seeing the film now, women in the film are both modern in their Sicily born, but in the end, conservatively constructed to follow the heterosexual relationship with men. And some thought that it might have been Ozu script sort of influence, not a little bit different from later Tanaka's work.
Interesting.
Thus, the first two films she directed were possible thanks to several external factors and many familiar faces who supported her in her difficult post-war years as an actress. When she began acting, as Tomita Mika says in her interview, Tanaka initially refused to be regarded as a woman director. She didn't like the idea of being gendered as a woman, as many directors claim even today. They want to be regarded simply as a director, as male directors are not called men directors. However, Tanaka's view apparently changed when she embarked on the third project, the film adaptation of The Eternal Breast, now with the English new title, Forever Woman, I think, about a woman poet who died very young because of breast cancer. The project was promoted as a woman's film and collaborated with woman scriptwriter Tanaka Sumie. Tanaka Kinuyo expressed her desire to direct a woman's point of view to depict the fragility of woman's body as well as emotions that could only be understood as a woman. Indeed, publicity materials testify that the film was deliberately promoted as a woman's film, josei eiga, clearly an effort by the film industry to address a potential film market, a female market. As a newspaper advertisement for the film reads, quote, "This is a film directed by Tanaka Kinuyo, dedicated to all womankind. The paces and intensity of women's lives have never before been so revealed," end quote. This advertisement thus emphasizes that the film was written, adapted, and directed by women and targeted at all women. In sum, it declares itself as a women's cinema in every respect. Tanaka was said to be very moved by the original background, biographical novel and immediately wanted to make it into a film. As I wrote in my essay, Kinuyo and Sumie, When Women Write and Direct, this was the turning point for Tanaka's directorial career. It seems that she finally met a subject that she could feel of her own, material in which she could devote herself to exert her potential as a director in her own right. Also, because of this material, which focuses on the heroine telling the story from her point of view, unlike the previous two films whose narratives did not revolve around woman protagonists, Tanaka might have found that her performing experience could help direct the woman lead character without being intervened by the male writer's perspective, as was in previous two films. At any rate, from this film on, the remaining 4 films she directed, she continued to choose women scenario writers for the next 2 films and narratives surrounding female leading characters. In other words, she found her director matière in the generic discourse of women's films, that is melodrama, which incidentally was her meta-analysis expertise. The Eternal Breast was critically received well, at least in short newspaper reviews. She continued to direct The Wandering Princess 1960 under Dae with scriptwriter Wadanato and Kyo Machiko as the lead. And then Girls of Dark in 1961 under Tokyo Eiga, a production branch of Toho with scriptwriter Tanaka Sumie, with Hara Chiseko as the lead. And the final film, Ogin-sama, Love Under the Crucifix, under Bunge Production Ninjin Club Japan, a production company formed by 4 actresses, Arima Ineko, Kishikeiko, and Kuga Yoshiko, with Arima playing the leading character.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it's all of these aspects are so intriguing, not the least of which is that she started out as saying, I don't want to be a woman director, and then came into it thinking, yes, actually, I do want to be a woman director. And that is echoed today. Absolutely. We have these actresses, these
so
directors who start out saying, I don't want to be a woman director. There aren't men directors. And then they change their mind as their career goes
because
on.
They have to face the actual, hardships in the industry and realize that they are actually women directors.
Yes, a little experience goes a long way. And it's so interesting that there's precedent for this with Tanaka Kinuyo. So on that note of gender, there must have been a lot of promotional hype around this directorial debut, Koibumi, or Love Letters, considering that she was already a celebrity and now she's a director, so amplification of the celebrity. So can you tell us her experience as a director, and were there gendered expectations for these films or challenges that she faced as a woman director?
it's not actually very easy to speculate about the reception of Tanaka's films from the general audience, since not many documents remain that are relevant to the issue. However, from the newspaper reviews, the critical initial receptions were generally positive. As for love letters, one newspaper reviewer writes that he was pleasantly surprised by Tanaka's skillful direction manifest in her debut film, labeling it as an A film among the list of Japanese film directors. The film was entered as a contestant in the Cannes Film Festival in 1954, actually. Newspaper reviews are generally more lenient than those in film journals, but one could see the studios and journalists paying respect to an actress who was brave enough to venture into this challenge, I think. Some pointed out the melodramatic aspect in Tanaka's films, albeit not necessarily in affirmative tones, but appreciate the genuine quality of expressing the tragic nature of woman's life, as in the case of The Wandering Princess. There has been a lot of discourse, both positive and negative, about Tanaka's abilities as a director. I do not quote actual statements, but some said that Tanaka was not quick enough. She changed scripts and dialogues on the set. Her direction to the performers were not precise enough, and her persistent attitude about certain details were received negatively by crew members, mainly male as well as actors, including females. I read somewhere that assistant director Ishii Taro said some negative comments about her direction. But anyway, here I would say there's a double, that is gender and profession bias against Tanaka. As a woman director and an actress turning into a director. Possibly Tanaka learned how to behave as a director from her own experience working with great masters of Japanese cinema, who had the privilege of taking an authoritative attitude during shooting. Mizoguchi was famous for not giving any specific direction to actors, and sometimes very slow, waiting for the satisfactory performance result from the actors. These male masters were allowed to behave in certain ways, but that was not allowed for Tanaka. Despite or for all that, her long, successful career as an actor, she was destined to be judged more harshly by other crews and actors, I think. For example, Tanaka was said to have insisted on location shooting in Shibuya in Love Letters, which demanded more preparation and hard work from the crews. If we see the film now, one of the charms of the film, The Love Letter, her debut film, is that the film captures the atmosphere and energy of post-war Japan, thanks to the Shibuya landscape captured by location shooting. Or Fuji Manami, who appeared in Ogin-sama, leaves a little negative comment regarding Tanaka's ability as a director, as she claims in an interview, quote, "Even though she was such a great actress, having worked with such masters as Mizoguchi Ozunaruse, but being a good director is a totally another thing. Ogin-sama was her sixth film to direct, but the shooting was too slow. Directing actors, including myself, was not very clear without confidence. She directs by showing the gesture herself, but not clear enough for newcomers like myself or Tamura Masakazu, and we were perplexed. Yet she is persistent and in what she wants. Moreover, she revises scripts and dialogue on the set, so much so the cameraman is put in a difficult position to accommodate to these changes," end quote. Everything Tanaka does is qualified as a good director. Yeah.
Right. These are the hallmarks of good direction now, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Even though there might have been some truth to it, because the film as a historical epic was a big production. I mean, the Ogin-sama, the film was a very big production distributed by Shochiku. Therefore, it may not have been easy for any director to orchestrate the entire crew and actors. Ogin-sama's previous film, Girls of Dark, was relatively a small film production with Nagashima Ichiro as a producer, of familiar faces and more easy to coordinate the direction. Yet, Hara Chisako also said that she didn't think Tanaka direction particularly impressive, and she didn't like the ending of the film, which I would say was one of the strengths of the film, to be and sea diver. Hara Chisako thought it was a ridiculous ending that the prostitute, former prostitute, becoming a sea diver in the end. But actually, Tanaka was very, even Tanaka Sumiya was objected to it, but Tanaka Kinuyo insisted that she really wanted to have this ending as a positive note, for a woman to sort of embark on a new career.
It resonates with her.
And I think it's very important anyway.
Yeah.
Moreover, by the early 1960s, filmmaking was already shifting its styles and audience tastes. New wave directors had appeared. It was a time for politics and student movement. Tanaka's style was basically classically trained, as I will describe more soon. The time expected a more direct depiction of reality. For example, as a melodrama, notices when a woman ascends the stairs was hailed as a new direction for women's films. Even such a change in both the social and industry environment, Ogin-sama may have seemed too old school. But as for confidence, it's probably one of the most challenging issues for women directors, I think. If they act too authoritative, they may be criticized for it. And if they do not give specific directions and quick decisions, they may be accused of being incisive or unconfident, implying that women are capable of being precise. As Belgian film director Chantal Ackerman once said in an interview, quote, "I think the real problem with women's films usually has nothing to do with the content. It's that hardly any women really have confidence enough to carry through on their feelings," end quote. Tanaka might have worked hard to find appropriate ways to carry out women's feelings, as it were, both on and off screen. On the other hand, it's unfair, I would argue, for Tanaka to be always compared with her great masters such as Mizoguchi and Ozu or Naruse, who are perhaps the world's best directors of all time. Unfortunately, Tanaka's critical evaluation as a director has been constructed negatively through casual interviews of those who worked for her, like the one I quoted, mainly the staff crew and other actors, particularly the aspiring new actresses who may have felt the need to prove themselves to the other crew members by dismissing this superior presence, who they could never match in the craft of acting anyway. So it is important to remember that between Love Letters, the debut film, and The Eternal Breast, her real sort of film as a woman director, she collaborated with Midoguchi in his most celebrated films in his career, The Life of Haru Ugetsu and Saisho the Bailiff. She may have confirmed the need to find the ways to be a woman director, not, having seen Mizoguchi direct the woman as this particularly a type, signifying this sort of tragic role to be a victim of the society. In these sort of three films that Tanaka played the lead, she might have felt the need to make a different kind of film for women audience and also for women character. And that might have led her to be involved passionately in making the eternal breast.
Listening to you talk about her, I mean, there's just incredible layers of pressure and expectation, and then also her desire to do something. I mean, from the staff and the crew and the the actors, and then the people that are receiving films and these famous directors that are around her. And I think I'm sure that directors are acting in as directors in some part when they come on set, but it seems like she had that double duty of acting as an acting director.
Right, exactly.
She was learning from her fellow actors, and then even as recreating that, the double standard of, well, that's not what I expected from a woman director, even though I've never seen one before.
Exactly. And she must have been, it's always like all the time pressured to prove herself, both as a director and both as a, action director, but having gone through that pressure and to have directed 6 films in that time, I mean, she must have been so determined. She must have been so determined and so dedicated to her will to be a film director, I think. And also Tomita Mika said that she never abandoned her, sort of interest in film direction. So
if we had a time machine and we could empower her to have made more films.
It must have been wonderful to see her, more films.
Yes, really inspiring. So you've spoken about this a little bit already, especially with her third film, Eternal Breasts, this film that she kind of came into her own a little bit, I think, is what you're suggesting. So what did she bring to filmmaking that we might not have seen before, if she wanted to present this women's point of view and create something new, something that women haven't seen before? What is it? What might we not have seen? And do you get a sense, she only made 6 films, but do you get a sense of a Tanaka style that may have emerged? Or what do you like in particular about her films?
It's actually difficult to specify, or like to determine if Tanaka's style in like sort of nouvelle vague sort of auteurist sense, because I think she was basically a classical film director. Tanaka was concerned with the issue of how to deliver authentic emotional experiences of a woman on screen, I think. She was also very familiar with the classical film style, as I said, which is often called the Hollywood classical film style. Her films may feel still too classical in a way for young audiences, but I would recommend seeing The Eternal Breasts and Girls of Dark to films that do not seem to grow old. The former, the Eternal Breast, deals with the issue of breast cancer and a woman's desire to create and live according to her will and wishes without compromising social rules. Also, depicting breast cancer is still regarded as a taboo, I think. Not many films have been made directly dealing with the disease and death. The latter deals with women and sex work. Even though the historical context is post-war Japan, there are still many women who are forced into this profession because of financial and other reasons. Tanaka's approach in both films to depicting such issues for the women is not to make them victims. In fact, in her films, except for the first 2, women are not simple victims of circumstances. This quality in her films is important, I think, because both literature and film tradition of political discourses have often used the woman figures as a symbolic victim of social and political wrongs. The tragic death of the victim heroine was needed to condemn the system, not to redeem herself. The heroine was used as a signifier to express something else. But in Tanaka's melodramas, the heroine was allowed to be and live with her will and desires, even if the world they inhabit may still be ultimately fictional. There is certain affective authenticity in her depiction. And if we examine her films closely, referring to the scripts, what makes her film distinctive, even if these registers may seem small, could be traced by her directorial decisions. Take The Eternal Breast. Tanaka's depiction makes the narrative more compact and less dialogue-driven, relying more on subtle mise-en-scène and tight editing. As a director, she maintained the repetitive structure, which is constructed so efficiently in the script by accentuating visual repetitions, which suggests that she knew very well the formal and visual principles of classical Hollywood cinema. For example, the posture in which the heroine, Fumiko, throws herself on the tatami mat and wrenches her body to express emotional pain at the discovery of her husband's affair is repeated twice when she collapses with agonizing physical pain in her chest because of the breast cancer. So the pain is repeated visually the same way. The scene in which her loved one, Hori, takes a bath in an earlier scene is later mirrored after the heroine's breast cancer surgery. In the hospital, when facing her fear of death, Fumiko is alone in the corridor, which leads to the morgue, and she stands clutching the wrought iron gates. The composition is repeated near the end of the film, after Fumiko has died, when her children run to the fence to cry out "mother" with their back to the camera. The composition is very similar, reminding a previous scene. Thus, Tanaka translates visually the repetition established in the scenario to intensify the affective connection between the scenes, illuminating the tragic differences, especially sort of connecting the pain as a woman and the pain of the disease, breast cancer, and the tragedy which comes because of it. After it, the children and motherhood, and these are relating issues that are visually connected together.
Right. One is a betrayal of the body, but also of the connections and the passion. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. On the other hand, Tanaka subverts the classical gender structuration surrounding the heroine's gaze. In classical Hollywood filmmaking, the woman is characterized as the object to be looked at, as Laura Mulvey argues in her influential article. This rule is still relevant in many women's films in 1940s Hollywood, as Mary Ann Dorn has examined in her The Desire to Desire. The narrative may be geared towards the heroines to move forward in 1940s Hollywood cinema, but they are often caught by the male lead's gaze. But in Tanaka's films, the heroine is the one who looks and desires. The male characters are objectified by her strong, passionate gaze, discussed by Kato Mikiro and Gonzalez and Ueda's articles. Tanaka uses mirrors as important decor to initiate the heroine's looks. One of the most memorable scenes in all of Tanaka's films is the bath scene in which the heroine, after her mastectomy, asks her best friend, whose late husband was her love interest, to let her use the bath when he used to bathe. Tanaka repeats a previous scene in which the husband was taking the bath with exactly the same composition in this scene. Where the husband was in the bathtub was replaced by the heroine now. The wife accidentally opens the small window of the bathroom and sees her scar of the surgery and the burns from the radiant treatment left on the chest. The wife turns herself around to the other side of the window and refuses to look at her as if she had witnessed something she should have not. The heroine then starts confessing to the wife that she was in love with him, the husband, and feels that her wrong affection for the husband, for her best friend, might have caused her to be inflicted by cancer. Then, in perfect movement coordination between the two women, in their turning their bodies in the opposite direction, the heroine shuts the small window and the wife moves to the other room. In the short montage scene, which lasts only a few minutes, Tanaka managed to put the heroine's female sexuality and forbidden desire and the taboo and repression in such a precise and concise manner. The exchange between the two women is extremely tense and memorable. By seeing this scene only, one may feel the distinguished articulation of Tanaka as a director who knows how to mise-en-scène female sexuality and desire. Such energy and passion are rarely depicted in the film made in 1950s, I think. On the other hand, Girls of Dark is also a fascinating film to present-day viewers because it does have a certain quality of queerness in its depiction of women in the reform facility. There is indeed a senior lesbian character who used to work at Yoshiwara, a famous red light district. The way film depicts quite frankly the difficulty in getting out of prostitution and social reform seems to be honest, particularly in terms of the biased view and division between them and the housewives who regard these women as potential threats to their respectable family institution. Even though the narrative is set in post-war Japan, when the anti-prostitution law was soon to be enforced, the contradiction in which the patriarchal domestic ideology reinforces the division between women and inflicts the blame on the women, not the men who exploit such women, underlies the film's portrayal of the former prostitute, not to be discouraged by the prejudice. Tanaka modified the original ending in which the heroine is lost again in the crowded city, implying that she goes back to the same situation as the novel, sets to another, where the heroine decides to work as a female diver, one of the representative professions for local Japanese women. As I said, though the actress Hara Chiseko, who played the heroine, thought it was rather idiosyncratic and realistic for such a character to choose, the film's strength lies exactly in Tanaka's decision to end the film with an open ending, where hope is found for a girl who lives in the world of darkness. And Tanaka really insisted that, as I said.
Yeah, I thank you so much for not only that rich description, but very insightful lens into analyzing how those scenes play out. And it's really delightful to listen to you unpack those scenes so eloquently. I love it. So you've mentioned this piece that you've already written, Kinuyo and Sumie, when women write and direct. And as you wrote in your piece, for many decades, Tanaka's films, they were obscure, despite showing at Cannes, and they were rarely shown outside of women's specific film festival programs. But recently, it seems like there is this keen interest in Tanaka, and she seems to be showing up in retrospectives all over the place, at major events like Cannes again as an anniversary, and at major exhibition sites like the Lincoln Film Center in the US. So why this sudden interest in Tanaka, do you think? Could you speculate for us?
Yeah, it's a phenomenon, I
It
think.
is. Yeah.
Amazing. Such a welcoming, phenomenon.
But now, I think, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Finally, after so many years. But I think the Me Too movement and the awareness of gender bias in the film industry have been keenly recognized for the last few years, and I think it helped. Also, Mark Cousins' documentary, Women Make Film, a new road movie through a camera, has included many scenes from the Eternal Breast that might have drawn attention of the viewers in the world. In addition, younger scholars abroad, including Alejandra in Spain, Michael Smith and Irene Gonzalez in the UK, who edited a monograph on Tanaka Kinuyo, have shown interest in Tanaka as both an actress and director, as well as Carlotta Films in France are the driving force of showing her films. Now, these events and sudden interest abroad have promoted Japanese studios, including Shochiku and Nikkatsu, to restore and revisit Tanaka's films. And importantly, younger women generation staff members, not all women, but many women staff members of these studios who have never had a chance to see Tanaka's films, actually had a chance to see these films and renewed their unconsciously biased conception about Tanaka as a director. Also, I think there are mainly two reasons for this interest. First, the emergence of new generation in the film industry who are not very familiar with Tanaka as an actress, for better or worse, to begin with. So Tanaka's directorial works for the first time without having been exposed to any prescribed criticism of her works, and found the films actually still resonating to them directly. At the same time, they are surprised to know that this legendary actress did direct not only one film, as some major actresses manages to do, such as John Mora or Anna Karina or Hidari Sachiko, but Tanaka actually did 6 films in the 1950s and early 1960s. Feminist film history have found many women filmmaking during the silent era or after the 1970s, when the second wave of feminism organized many women's festivals then, expecting a handful of directors between 1930s and 1950s. Now, scholars have found early Japanese documentary filmmakers such as Haneda Sumiko or Tokieda Tokie, who began filmmaking during the 1950s. I think, you know, these sort of women directors might have been a real sort of early pioneers, post-war period, not the silent period. So that might have been the new discovery for many feminist media history scholars abroad. Film history, and especially feminist film history, has begun to realize that there has been an unknown Japanese film history of women filmmakers. Also, Tanaka's films are well written and skillfully crafted, emotionally engaging, and have superb cinematography and solid acting. In other words, high quality production. And seeing the good tradition of women's films from the classical era is refreshing in many ways, even though they may seem at times quaint. We still need more strong women's films, even in the 21st century, which can go straight to the heart of both men and women, as Tanaka's films do.
Thank you so much. Oh, well, I hope that everyone is inspired to go out and see these now quite accessible films by legendary Tanaka Kinuyo. Thank you so much for speaking with me today and for all of your expertise.
You're very welcome.